thank you so much everyone for joining us today for this World Lupus Day webinar, a couple of days after World Lupus Day, which was the 10th of May. I'm delighted to be joined by Beth, Maryann and Khiry today, who took part in our Experiences of Diagnosis video and have been extremely generous with their time and sharing their stories, which isn't always an easy thing to do, but we know often helps people just to hear from other people who might have been in the same boat as them or have been on a similar journey. So how today is going to work is in a minute, I'll just ask everyone to briefly introduce themselves, and then we'll watch the video together, which will be about 4.5 minutes. Hopefully that will work through Zoom, but if it's a little bit laggy, it is on our YouTube channel, and my colleague Nikita will put a link in the chat so you can watch it again at another time with a bit less of Zoom lag. And then after that, Khiry, Beth and Maryann will share a bit about their experiences. They'll each talk a little bit about their experience of diagnosis, and then we'll have time for questions. So at any point during the webinar, feel free to pop a question in the Q&A box and we will get to as many as we can. And thank you to people who have already sent questions in advance as well, so we'll get started on some of those. Just a note to say that we can't give kind of specific medical advice, like tell you what kind of particular test results might mean or whether you might have lupus or not, but we can chat about kind of personal or general experiences about diagnosis and all of this kind of process. So yeah, oh, and the webinar will be recorded and up on our YouTube channel at a later date. So I know what having a foggy brain is like. So if you miss anything or want to come back later or want to share it with other people you know, you'll be able to do that, and we'll publish on our social media channels when that's live. So yeah, I think that's all of the housekeeping type things done. So my name's Debbie Kinsey. I'm the Health Information Officer at Lupus UK. So if I just move over to Khiry, if you'd like to introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Khiry. I'm 33 years old and I'm a lupus volunteer.
Beth or Maryann, just so you're about to go.
I don't mind.
I was like, oh.
Hi,
Go on,
I'm
Beth,
Beth.
after you.
Oh, thank you so much, Maryann. Hi, I'm Beth. I am an official Lupus UK ambassador. I'm 29 years old. I was diagnosed with lupus SLE when I was 19 in, oh gosh, is my math correct there? October 2015. I have a beauty YouTube channel where I talk about lupus, Beth's Beauty, and I also Twitch stream gaming content so that we can raise funds for Lupus UK.
Hi, I'm Maryann, and I am, how old am I? 42 years old. After 40, you stop counting. I'm 42 years old. I was diagnosed with lupus in 2018. I've got SLE, DLE, and all the associated things with that. And I'm a lupus contributor. You might have read my blog that comes out like every quarter or so.
Great, thanks so much. And we're also joined today by Nikita, who's going to provide some very essential tech support in the background. If you'd like to introduce yourself.
Hey guys, I am Nikita. I'm the Social Media Projects Officer at Lupus UK. I also have lupus myself. I was diagnosed at 15. I'm now 24, so it's been almost 10 years. But yeah, I'll be moderating the chat today.
Great, thanks so much. So what I'll do now is, fingers crossed, the technology gods are with us, and I will share the video that everyone took part in for World Lupus Day.
What were the symptoms that led to you being diagnosed?
I think my earliest memory of any kind of lupus-related symptoms would have been having issues with my hands and not being able to use them properly. I wasn't able to type, wasn't able to write, and the doctors kept telling me that it would be, that it was RSI, but I knew there was something more going on.
I was first diagnosed in 2009. My symptoms were very severe joint pains. I couldn't walk up the stairs. I struggled to play football. I couldn't do any of the things that I liked doing.
I was about 17 when I started to experience symptoms of lupus, which was very young to be experiencing something as chronic as the fatigue that I was feeling.
What was your experience of getting diagnosis? How difficult was it?
I think I'd had symptoms of lupus for a long time before I was diagnosed. Getting a diagnosis was really difficult. The symptoms got worse and less answers happened as I went on. And it did eventually lead to a point where a GP told me to start thinking outside the box, and if actually I was suffering from mental illness and not actually experiencing physical pain.
So, Khiry, what was your experience of getting a diagnosis?
It didn't take that long for me to be diagnosed. I went to the doctors and I told them my symptoms, and they prescribed me some anti-inflammatories, and they said after taking this, the joint pain should get better. But unfortunately it didn't. And I done a blood test and I gave it a urine sample, and a couple of weeks later I got the call to say that it was lupus.
I think my first symptom probably started in about 2008, and I was diagnosed in 2018. No one was taking me seriously. And I remember that what led to my diagnosis was actually going into A&E one time. I remember waking up in the morning feeling, you said about the burning sensation, feeling like my scalp was on fire. And I said, there's something really wrong with me. Please believe me, please take me seriously.
What I find astounding is that there's 3 people talking about this right now, and we all have incredibly similar stories about our diagnosis and how difficult it was to be diagnosed with lupus and how difficult it was to be heard.
How did you feel about your lupus diagnosis?
A relief initially, because you have finally been given answers to the big mystery of what is going on. It wasn't all relief though. It did come with a sense of guilt and a sense of mourning for the person that I was before becoming chronically ill.
I had no idea what lupus was, me or my family. We had never heard of it. No one in my family had ever had lupus, so at first very scared, very surprised, and me personally, I was thinking to myself, what's this going to mean for my future? How's it going to affect me going forward?
Once you got the diagnosis, what helped?
I'm going to say, firstly, I'm going to say my family. They were very, very supportive to me. They reassured me everything's going to be okay. They're here for me.
I found the Lupus UK website really helpful for resources, for specifically talking to employers and new people to help them understand my condition.
Social media was really important to me because it created a network outside of my family. People that I could rely on, that would support me, that would talk to me, that I could vent to. People that gave me information that wasn't readily available elsewhere.
As the years have gone by, I've definitely learned that lupus is only part of my story, and I've gone into online content creation. The future is bright with things like gaming, building communities, making new friends and meeting new people.
I've been able to go and do talks about my journey with lupus and maybe inspire and help people that have been newly diagnosed.
There was a time when I thought I wasn't going to be able to walk properly again. So I'm walking, I'm talking, I'm able to read again, I've written a book, and I'm fostering again. So for me, things are looking bright.
Great, that's such a great video. Thanks so much everyone for taking part in it. I think first of all, I'll hand over to Khiry just to talk a bit about your experience of diagnosis and what it was like for you.
So following on from the video, I was 18 when I was first diagnosed, and prior to this, I've been healthy my whole life. I never had any health issues or anything like that. And I was at my second year of college, and I woke up one day, and I just had these really bad joint pains, and it was very surprising because, like I said, I had never had anything wrong with me. So at first, I didn't really think anything of it. I kind of just shrugged it off, thinking that it was just like growing pains, or maybe I was playing too much football. I didn't think it would be anything serious, but as time went on, weeks went on, the pain was getting worse. So I went to the doctors with my mum, and obviously explained to my symptoms to them, and they gave me some anti-inflammatory and said, once you take these, you should feel better afterwards. But after taking a course of antibiotics, there was no change, and my joint pains, if anything, got worse. I wasn't really able to play football, and I loved playing football at the time, so it kind of hindered my football. And I was just tired all the time. So I went back to my GP again, And then this time they referred me to the hospital where I need to bring a urine sample and I take a blood test when I arrived. And when I did go to my appointment, the consultant said to me that he's 90% sure that I have lupus. And at the time, I had no idea what lupus was. I'd never heard of it before. No one in my family had it. So I was surprised. My family was surprised. And he said to me, yeah, he's 90% sure that I've got lupus. So he looked at my bloods, and then a few weeks later, I got the call to say that I had lupus, and it was a lot. It was a lot to take in at 18 years old. At these times, I was supposed to be, going out with friends, playing football, doing things like teenagers do. But instead, I would now have to deal with this lifelong condition, and it was at first it was very hard to process it. It took me a couple of years. Even if I remember it happened in the summer of 2009. So that summer, I didn't really want to do anything. Like I stayed in bed, didn't want to see friends or family. I just felt quite depressed. Thinking, why me? Why is this happening to me? And literally that whole summer, I didn't want to do anything. And eventually, after going to my appointments and I obviously had to start taking medication, things like that. I started to come around to the idea of you have to process it. This is something there's obviously nothing you can do about it. This is going to be for life now. So you just have to try and accept it as best you can and trying to move on with life. Me having lupus also affected both my kidneys as well, which meant I've had to have 2 kidney transplants, and I've been on dialysis as well. My second transplant was in 2013, and since then my kidneys have been fine, but because of my lupus, it's led to other complications. So I've ended up having 3 heart attacks. I've ended up having an ileostomy because of bowel obstruction. I've had problems with my skin, like pneumonia. So over the years, lupus has obviously caused a lot of different other health conditions and a lot of hospital admissions for me because of lupus. But over the last 2 years, I managed to stay healthy and not have any hospital admission. So I'm thankful for that. And now I'm just trying to get back to living some sort of normal life again. The last couple of years, I've managed to get involved with Lupus UK and do some talks and go to some events. So I'm just hoping I can continue doing that and inspiring some other people that are maybe going through lupus at a young age. And I just hope that me talking and sharing my journey can help the next person.
Thanks so much for sharing that, Khiry.
No problem.
Really appreciate it. Maryann, will you be happy to go next?
I had a feeling you were going to ask me. So my diagnosis came after almost, I would say between 9 and 10 years of symptoms. And as with most people who've got a delayed diagnosis, I was going back and forth to my GP with various different things, pains in my hands, my wrists. I had a couple of times where I had to go to A&E because of back pain. There would be no rhyme or reason for it. It would just, flare up. Neck pain, excruciating headaches and things like that. I got told a lot that because I was a shift worker, that I was tired, the fatigue was due to overworking, exhaustion. I was told that I was depressed. And that could have been true because, as we know, depression is a symptom of lupus, but I didn't feel that was what was going on with me. And it wasn't until I just kept getting sick for about 3 years straight. I was sick for months on end. I'd get chest infection after chest infection and just random viruses. And then the year I was diagnosed, about May, I had shingles and a infection in my leg, like a bacterial infection in my leg that just wouldn't go away. And I didn't know this until later on, but I'd done a blood test at the GP, and the blood test actually showed that I was SM positive, which is an indication of SLE, and it said that in the notes, but my GP didn't pick up on it at all. And it wasn't until I started getting skin lesions. So I'd had ulcers in my mouth, I remember I had a kind of ulcer in my ear and behind my ears. And for about a year, I'd been losing hair. I had like a big patch on my scalp, which was just like hard. And the doctor said to me that it's probably psoriasis or something like that. Gave me a couple of drops that I had to put in on it. But essentially, I ended up in A&E one day because I couldn't walk. Oh yeah, so I had lots of memory issues, lots of cognitive issues, vertigo. I had like blackouts. My vision would go all of a sudden and I wouldn't be able to see. And yeah, I was essentially told that, kind of like Beth said in her in the video, that, you know, maybe it's in my mind, not really happening. And then one day, my scalp just kind of lit on fire. It literally felt like it was burning. And I remember going into the bathroom and putting my head in cold water. And when I was doing that, I had like these heart palpitations, then my legs just stopped working. It was like my brain wouldn't connect to my legs and wouldn't, so thankfully I had my phone in the room and I was like stretched out, got my phone, called an ambulance. And I remember when the ambulance came, I thought I couldn't figure out how to get to open the door because bathroom's upstairs, doors downstairs, obviously. And I have kind of crawled down the stairs, like, you know, when you bump when you're a little kid, I was bumping down the stairs, bump, 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 bump. And I kept hearing them knocking and I was like, hold on. And kind of stretched up, opened the door. And when they saw me, they were like, we've got no idea what's happening. And I was feverish, hot and cold sweats, like really sensitive skin, couldn't be touched, my body just felt so crazy. And I remember them taking me into A&E, and the consultants, nobody could figure out what was wrong with me. And in the end, they tried to tell me that I had a 24-hour bug. And I remember being a bit hyper and just saying, like screaming at them and saying, look, there's something seriously wrong with me. Look at my skin, look at my scalp. There's something really wrong with me and nobody believes me. And I said this to a nurse and the nurse went back to the consultant and I could hear them discussing it. And I could hear the consultant saying, just discharge her. And I was like, just when he came back, I said, you can't discharge me. There's something wrong with me. And he said that he's going to make a referral to like urgent care for me to come back in a couple of days. And when I went to the urgent care centre, another consultant, totally separate, just came, looked at my notes, looked at me, asked me a few questions, and then said, I'm quite certain you've got lupus. And I was like, huh? And he said, yeah, I think you've got lupus. So they did some more tests. And I remember I had to go and have a biopsy of my scalp, which came back and confirmed that I had discoid lupus. I had SLE. And yeah, that was quite, I think I remember laughing, which sounds completely crazy, but I was laughing because I was like, oh my gosh, all this time, you know, and it just took one person who hadn't been seeing me, you know, like my GP's seen me since I was like 16. So, you know, I've got a regular GP who knows me. And this one person took one look at my notes and was like, yeah, I think you've got lupus. And I remember feeling relieved and also terrified because, you know, I'd heard about some celebrities having lupus and I just remember thinking, oh gosh, you know, and went on like a rabbit hole, went down the rabbit hole, should I say, and was looking up all different things to do with lupus. And just, yeah, I think I was scared. I was scared, didn't know what was going to happen to me, especially with the discoid lupus, because I kept seeing pictures of, you know, how it could affect the skin. And at that point, my skin wasn't that bad. Since then, it has been. I had I've had a terrible flare, which lasted almost a year. And you know, my skin was all flared up. You wouldn't be able to recognize me. I just didn't look like myself. But at the time I was diagnosed, my skin was, it was still okay-ish. It was burning and it was itchy, but it was still okay. So I was like, I was really scared. I was scared about my heart, my lungs, because I couldn't breathe properly a lot of the time. And I just thought to myself, I don't know what's going to happen to me. My family were good. They were great, actually. Kind of kicked in straight away. And I remember thinking to myself, I think I was in, even though I knew it was happening, I was still trying to do the things that I could normally do, that I would normally do. But it just, yeah, I was sleeping all the time and getting upset and crying a lot because I wasn't able to do the things that I was used to doing. And that kind of, although I was surrounded by people, that kind of made me feel really lonely because I didn't think that people, I kind of felt, yeah, I felt lonely. I felt like I was letting people down because I wasn't who I used to be. I wasn't the strong person. I wasn't the able person. I wasn't the capable person. I wasn't, and I also wasn't used to people looking after me in that way. I remember when it got really bad, you know, I couldn't eat. I had to be bathed. I had to have somebody feed me, help me to eat. It was just, I wasn't used to being like that at all. I'm that person. I'm the person that gives people help. So for me, it was just completely insane. But the majority of my symptoms have been, you know, to do with my heart, to do with my lungs. My blood, the lupus was attacking my blood. So I had a low red blood count, which at one point they were talking about giving me a blood transfusion because they didn't understand where my blood was going to. And then they figured out that it was the lupus actually killing off my blood cells. And yeah, like I said, I had lots of cognitive issues where my brain just wouldn't talk to the rest of my body. So I wasn't able to pick up things. I wasn't able to walk properly. It was just, you know, one day I'd be walking, the next day I wouldn't. So yeah, it was a really crazy time. Yeah, I'm going to leave it there.
Okay, thank you, Maryann. I'll move over to Beth now if you'd like to share your experiences.
My experience was looking back on things now, I kind of put things together and I'm like, oh, that makes so much sense knowing now what I know. But I was diagnosed when I went to university. So I'd just finished my sixth form year. I'd finished year 13. I was waiting on exam results from my college to see if I got into university or not. My parents had gone away. Unfortunately, my grandmother at the time had cancer. And so it was a very stressful time for me, looking forward to new things. And I always felt like I was like a not very mentally healthy teenager. Like I had a lot of depression, a lot of anxiety growing up as a teenager. And it was always sort of like, oh, you're just going through the motions, or you're just a teenager, very dismissive of my mental health. Now that I'm in remission with lupus and I have gone through the treatment and I still take hydroxychloroquine and I still visit my rheumatologist, my mental health is so much better, which I'm like, oh, okay. So like it was almost like all of my like mental health issues just sort of disappeared. My anxiety is no more. So now looking back, I now know what that was. That was like a really big warning sign for me with lupus. But my story really starts, I think, a lot earlier than I acknowledged that it did. I, as a young child, had bowel problems. I was kept being diagnosed from like 8 years old, 10 years old with lazy bowels, which as I'd got older to being a teenager was then like things like, oh, it sounds like an obstructed bowel, take XYZ laxative and stuff. And those things helped, but now I know that they were just masking the bigger issue. I went to university quite unwell, lots of headaches, nausea, joint pain. And it's funny that Maryann mentioned back pain, because I suffered severely with back pain for the longest time, and I've always been told that that is not related to my lupus. So I just had a light bulb moment when Maryann was talking there, like, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Those things still get connected together, like even as an adult now, like 7-8 years on from my diagnosis, I'm like, oh my gosh, like things still click in my brain, like I wish I'd known that now, what then what I'd know now. So finishing secondary school, going into like college, sixth form, I started to get a lot of like what I know now as brain fog. My grades started to dip. I started to just come out with ailments like colds, flu all the time. I was so unwell. I just unexplained illness. It's things that other people tend to get over really quickly. I seem to really suffer with. And then I started going to the GP because I was coming out in rashes from across what I now know is, again, butterfly rash. So I came out in this huge rash across my cheeks and the bridge of my nose. But all over my body, I was coming out in this like what looked like pinprick like spots, and then they would spread out as the day went on into this full rash like all over my body. And it would burn to put like clothes over the top of it. I thought maybe I was allergic to detergent, like wash powder or something. Changing that to sensitive treatment made no difference. So I went to my GP, and my GP originally was like, oh, you've got acne, here's some antibiotics. Then I went back and was like, I'm still not better, and now I'm getting like joint pain and aching. Oh, here's some like a course of ibuprofen, I think I was put on for the longest time. Just take this course for like a month and we'll see how that helps. It didn't really touch anything. I was still in pain. Then I went back again to my GP and I said, what is this on my face, like the butterfly rash? And my mum was with me, and they were like, it's just acne, like you've got psoriasis, like all these misdiagnoses. And it was heartbreaking because I'm like 17, 18, going through one of the biggest changes in my life, thinking about university. Like I was going to do acting courses, I was singing, I was dancing, I was acting, I was in theater. I had, like all these big dreams to go and do stage shows or like audition for films, and all those things stopped when the physical pain came. I couldn't walk some days. I really struggled with inflammation in my knees and my feet. Going back to the GP and then being told the heartbreaking thing that they thought that maybe I should consider things outside the box and look more at my mental health, was just the most shocking appointment I think I've ever had, being dismissed in such a way that I was gaslit to think that actually I'm just making it all up. It's all in my head. It's a mental ailment or not a physical ailment. I went on to university and I actually changed my degree from a performing arts degree to a film degree, which was more of a sit down, like theory based degree, just because I knew that I couldn't tolerate with how much pain I was in. I then started seeing a doctor at a new surgery, and there were like 2 or 3 appointments before I burst into tears one day in the GP's office, and I went, "You've really got to help me." And the GP asked what I thought it was, and the previous night I had done what I don't really recommend anyone to do, which is Google your symptoms. Googling your symptoms is an incredibly dangerous thing to do, but it led to my answer. Ultimately, I came across the Lupus UK website, which listed the butterfly rash, the joint ache, the pain, the fatigue. And I took that like as a mental note. I was like, okay, maybe I have lupus. So when I went to the GP's office, and I'm sobbing, like I feel ridiculous when I think about it now, but I was so desperate that I'm sat like sobbing to this complete stranger, this GP who's just trying to get through his day. And I'm sobbing and I'm saying, I think I have lupus. And he went, what makes you think that? And I said, I came across the Lupus UK website. They're an official charity. So I know that my source is legitimate, it's important. And he said, let's look at it together. And honestly, hearing those words, the relief that came off like my entire body was just so nice to hear someone finally go, let's look at this together. I'm not dismissing you. I'm not telling you you're wrong. let's look at this together. And he moved his screen around. I remember it so vividly. And he looked at the Lupus UK website with me and he said, look, I've not really heard of lupus before, but looking at these symptoms and what you're telling me and what your notes say from the past however many years I'd been complaining of these symptoms, he said, I want to get you an emergency referral to a rheumatologist. I had a rheumatology appointment within a month. All my blood tests came back as all my ANA tests were fine. All my bloods looked normal. Lupus wasn't really anything that flagged, but I understand now that like there is no one test that can diagnose lupus. So blood tests in my case didn't really mean anything. And then my rheumatologist took one appointment with me, looked over a diary that I had kept of my symptoms for the past year, looked at my butterfly rash, the rash and the swelling and heat in my joints and said, I don't know how this was missed. I'm so sorry. You definitely have lupus. You are a textbook case. And if more medical professionals had known that along the way, had had the knowledge about lupus, I think that all that pain, the fear that I had gone through for such a long time just to get a rheumatologist to tell me I'm a textbook case would have been like such a open, closed, yep, this is what I think, because it just seems like there was a lack of knowledge of what lupus is and what lupus does to the body. I consider myself really lucky that I haven't had any organ failure. But I have had organ damage to my skin. The skin, I think a lot of people forget, is the largest organ to our body. I've had a lot of skin damage where I now wear like long sleeves because I'm worried about people seeing like the scars where the rash has been or across my face. Like I started a whole thing about I never wore makeup before I was diagnosed with lupus, and then when I got my lupus diagnosis, I then started covering it up because people would ask me the most bizarre questions like, are you contagious? And I'd be like, what a question to ask a stranger. Are you contagious? And I was like, wow, okay. So then I started to become a little bit so unsure of myself, and my confidence was completely taken from me, like as if lupus hadn't already taken so much from me, like changing the course of my life and my degree. I just wish that I had known so much now. But Maryann, you saying that thing about the backache really sort of like clicked in my head. Like that is a symptom that I complained about for like years, and it was sort of dismissed as growing pains. Like Khiry said, like growing pains was another thing that people said, psoriasis, and all those misdiagnoses really come down to the lack of knowledge from a medical standpoint that people didn't know, and I had to Google that myself to find out.
Yeah, thank you, Beth, for sharing as well. Thank you all three of you for sharing your experiences. Like I say, I know it's not always easy to relive all of these difficult things, but I think, yeah, it's so helpful for people to hear that. I think, like you said in the video, like everyone's experience is a bit different, like how lupus can impact everyone differently, but at the same time, there are these commonalities between people. Like you kind of, I guess, because that thing with lupus and the difficulty around diagnosis, it can look like other things at first. And so all of you initially got told, oh, it's probably something else. And then before you got to that lupus diagnosis, one question that we got sent in advance was around how, if you had any advice for anyone managing that, if they think they might have lupus or something similar, but they feel like they're getting a bit battered back from their GP. I don't know if anyone had any advice or anything they wanted to share for people that are in that situation. It's quite a challenging one, I think.
My biggest thing would be definitely to keep a diary of your symptoms. That was one thing that I was asked a lot about, was like a record of like what was happening to me. Keeping a diary. I got so obsessed with keeping this diary that I wrote down everything that I ate in case it was a food allergy or dismissed as a food allergy. I wrote everything that I had come into contact with that day, whether I had been outside in the sun, what the temperature was. And it's exhausting, let me tell you, but it got me the answers. What I had eaten that day, when I had eaten that day, what times the rashes appeared, what time the pain appeared. Any other like weird symptoms that I had, whether it was like nausea or whether I had fatigue. And I kept that honestly for about a year, even if like the day felt fine today, writing every single day down in a diary in a note format. And like this was an exhaustive list by like a year in. But it helped my diagnosis so much, like regardless of just being looked at as a textbook case, obviously there has to be evidence as well. And so the rheumatologist was like, this is a great way of keeping a diary. And then also taking someone with you to those appointments. If you feel like you're being dismissed, sometimes you feel braver in numbers because there's someone with you. And it sounds really silly, but even if it's a friend or I know that hospitals have, is it the PALS scheme that you can have a chaperone with you? Having someone with you might just give you that little bit of confidence to say, no, please listen to me. I would like to have a discussion about what I think it is. I think it's lupus. If you use an official source like Lupus UK for that symptoms list, you're definitely more likely to be listened to. I think my words were when I went into the GP, I know you don't like to hear this, but I Googled my symptoms. However, I got them from the Lupus UK website because like I understand like you Google things all the time, don't you? And you come up with the most like bizarre like diagnosis, and it's dangerous. But like having someone with you and going in armed with knowledge, I quite often think of a script that I'm going to say and pointers, taking a list with you of things that you want to discuss, keeping yourself on track. And if you do feel dismissed, asking to speak to someone else. It really does feel like sometimes you are passed from pillar to post, but it's really important, like at the end of the day, that you do advocate for yourself, and if you don't feel confident to do that, having someone advocate for you is really important too.
I would second what Beth says. I mean, my experience with my first rheumatologist wasn't as good, should I say, as Beth's experience. I remember going in armed with a list of all my symptoms, and the rheumatologist said to me, she hasn't got time to read all of those. She just wants to know, and then she just wants to do the examination of me and kind of move on from it. And I remember trying to go to those to my early appointments by myself and not making any headway with her. And so, yeah, having somebody accompany me just kind of gave us like strength in numbers. And also I would say get an email address, because even if they don't want to see it in the appointment, because a lot of the time, yeah, they're busy. If they've got like a 10-minute slot and they just want you in and out. That was my early experience, at least. And so sending an email, even if it goes to the rheumatology nurse, at least then it's documented, and you can say, well, it's on file. You need to put this on file because I've actually sent something to you. I remember going back to my GP after I had the diagnosis, and my GP told me, his words were, "You don't have lupus. I would have known." And that's because he'd known me for all those years. But like I said, for me to get diagnosed, it took someone who was a complete stranger, didn't know anything about me other than reading my symptoms, actually looking at me as an individual, and coming to that conclusion. So I think sometimes getting a second opinion is, that is the way to go. If you've been with your GP a long time, I'm not trying to be bad to them, but there's a sense of pride with them that they know you. So how possibly could you have something else? Of course they could diagnose you. They've known you for years, when actually they might not be thinking outside of the box. So getting a second opinion is, it's definitely something worthwhile, especially if you feel like you're not being listened to. Like Beth said, with the back, I was going in and out, going to the GP, going to A&E, sitting in A&E for hours. My back again, and nobody could tell me what was happening with my back. And realistically, again, like Beth said, you wouldn't look on any website and see, bad back problems as being part of a lupus diagnosis necessarily. But it's all consistent. Even things that were happening with my teeth. I'd lost a lot of teeth. I had lots of tooth decay, and my dentist was saying your oral hygiene is really good. I don't understand what's happening to your teeth. And then finding out that I had Sjogren's, I can't pronounce the word. I have Sjogren's, and that's like dry mouth. And that affects, you know, your gums. It can make you have receding gums. It can cause your teeth to be brittle. And so, again, causing lots of teeth decay. But your GP wouldn't tell you, or your dentist wouldn't tell you necessarily that the problems that you're having with your teeth are because you've got lupus. Do you know? So there was lots of things. I had bladder issues. You know, couldn't, you know, lots of stomach problems, like Beth was saying. My stomach problems, you know, I thought I had IBS for the longest time because that's what my GP told me. You know, you've got IBS, it's stress related. It's stress related. Just calm down, de-stress, relax yourself, you know, and finding out again, it was to do with the lupus. Was so second opinion, write it down, and if they don't want to hear it, send it to them in an email. Yeah, that's what I would suggest.
Yeah, like that thing with writing it down can also be super useful if your symptoms are flaring, because it's always kind of, you know, sod's law that the day of your appointment, the rash has gone down, it's not as bad as it was before. So taking pictures before or noting your symptoms when they come and go can really help. And you know, also like with brain fog is a very common symptom. So in the appointment, in the moment, just trying to remember everything could be so challenging. So that could be another really good thing about writing stuff down to help. And also just to mention with PALS that they cover England and Wales, and in Scotland, the organisation is called PASS, P-A-S-S. And so, yeah, like they said, getting a second opinion, being re-referred, you are able to do that, but it can be difficult sometimes navigating all those systems. So getting the support of a patient organisation like PALS or PASS can really help you sometimes to do that, because it's hard when you're not feeling well to navigate all of these processes and everything by yourself. But yeah, that's great. Thank you. Someone else kind of asked a similar-ish question in terms of if thinking back to when you were going through the diagnosis process, if someone else was in your similar situation with the kind of symptoms you had or things you're going through, do you have any advice for how they go through that kind of diagnosis process, or what advice you'd give to your sort of younger or past self about going through that diagnosis process? It's a tough one.
It is a tough one.
Yeah.
Not gaslighting yourself, like trusting what you are experiencing. It is really hard when you're being told by medical professionals when you're seeking a diagnosis that they don't know what's wrong with you. I remember a doctor coming to me and saying, "Good news, your tests are clear." And I was like, "Not good news, because I don't know what's wrong with me." Like what they perceived as good news was not good news to me. And it was just like being honest with yourself that you are experiencing those things. I think part of at least my poor mental health at the time, going through the symptoms of lupus before knowing what lupus was the absolute anxiety of thinking this is going to kill me, but also being like, is it all in my head? Honestly, writing things down has been such a lifesaver for just my own sanity, knowing that these things were happening and that I'm not misremembering. Honestly, just writing things down, being your best advocate. It's very similar to like the previous question, having someone that you can confide in. I find myself, and I appreciate that I'm in a very privileged position where I have a very loving family, very great friends that are there to lend a listening ear, even if they don't understand fully. They can still empathize, you know, with the fact that I'm sick. And it is hard because being long-term chronically ill, trying to find your people that understand that is difficult. I think the internet is a fantastic tool for reaching out to people and listening to people's experiences, where you can take sort of not necessarily advice, but comfort and solace in the fact that you're not alone. I think that has been a really big, beautiful aspect for me, is that there is a sense of loneliness that comes with being chronically ill. But just remembering who you are and that your symptoms are real and that you deserve the time and attention to have those symptoms looked into is such a really, really important factor. Write everything down.
I would say that, you know, what I would tell my past self was just let go. I think like I said, I was used to being a certain type of person and being able to do certain things. And I remember after my first hospital stay, not a hospital visit, but her first time I had to literally be in hospital. And one of the rheumatologists came up to me and she was talking to me, and she hugged me because I was just crying, and she was just there holding me and hugging me. And she just said, you've got to recognize that you're actually sick. And I think she's like, you shouldn't be working, because I was still saying, like, I've got to do this, I've got to do that, and I can't, this is, all of the things that lupus was stopping me from doing. And she was like, yeah, and they should, because you're sick, you need to stop. And like Beth said, I remember having so previously I'd had a neurology appointment and I'd had a CT scan, and the neurologist came back suggesting that I take depressants and go to talking therapy, which in all honesty is still really good advice, because that is something that I now would advocate for any lupus patient. Having someone to talk to, having counselling, having any kind of therapy is definitely something that you should look into. But again, all the symptoms that we have as lupus sufferers are, anxiety, sometimes you can have hallucinations, intrusive thoughts, depression. Those are actually symptoms of lupus. Aside from the fact that lupus actually makes you feel that way, what was happening for me was the lupus was in my brain. And so the CT scan didn't show that, but when I'd been in hospital for that period of time, they'd done an MRI and they saw, that it was basically on my brain. And she was like, and I was like, so I remember when I started crying, saying to this rheumatologist, I'm not going crazy. And she was like, no, you're not crazy. I said, I thought for the longest time that I was insane. I thought I was having I thought I had at one point, I remember joking with my friend that I had early onset Alzheimer's. I thought I had a brain tumor, because my brain was so fuzzy, things weren't making sense to me. And so, like you say, Beth, I should have just trusted my gut, because the way that I felt, I honestly thought I was going insane. I thought something, I started to believe what the GPs and the neurologist was telling me. And so I was walking around thinking, like, I can't believe this. I can't believe that I've got to this stage and I'm virtually insane. And it wasn't down to me. It was the lupus attacking my brain. And it took for the MRI and somebody actually showing me evidence of that for me to trust myself and believe what was actually happening to me. And so, yeah, believing in yourself is a big thing, because had I not, I wouldn't have been on the I wouldn't have expressed all the symptoms that I was having. I wouldn't be on the medication that I needed to be on. And I wouldn't be at the point now where I'm, yes, I do flare up and I do have my dodgy days or my dodgy weeks, but it's nothing compared to what it was like in 2018. 2018 to the end of 2020 were just you know, I would call it, I call them my wipeout years, even though I was still struggling on. They just, yeah. Now, you know, things are a lot more positive, but yeah, believing in yourself is a massive, it's something you have to do, and get some therapy, talk to somebody, because it is, it's incredibly necessary.
Yeah, I agree with talking to people. When I was diagnosed, I kept it all in. I didn't want to talk to any friends or family. I was like kind of embarrassed to even talk to my friends or tell them what I was going through. So I would definitely say, you know, talk to people, talk to your family, talk to friends. Obviously, they might not understand because they won't be going through it like you're going through, but speaking to them will help. And obviously, like Miriam said, speaking to a counsellor, which I've done on many occasions, has always helped. Like talking to someone that doesn't know you at all, that won't judge, and I think that definitely helps.
Great, thank you. Kind of related to that, it sounds like there are lots of different emotions around getting diagnosed, and kind of one question we have is kind of what were your kind of thoughts or emotions about learning you had lupus, and then has that stayed the same? Has it gone on, or is it different now? Do you feel differently about your diagnosis now than you did before?
Obviously, when I was first diagnosed, it was heartbreaking to know that you're gonna go have this lifelong condition, and I cried many times. Like me and my family, when I first diagnosed, it was very hard to come to terms with. But I think after a couple of years, it took me about a couple of years to actually accept that I actually have lupus. Like I just thought to myself, there's nothing you can do. You have this illness. You have to just have to learn to live with it. Fortunately, there's nothing you can do to reverse it. So you just if you don't accept it, you're never going to be able to go through life. So once I fully accepted it, I started to feel a bit better about myself, and I think mentally as well, it helped me get through like a lot of difficult challenges that I had.
Yeah, I agree. There is that level of acceptance that you have to begin to acknowledge that not only that this is your life now, and it is a hard point to come to, and it takes a lot of self-loathing and self-discovery, and I personally, for me, it took a lot of talking therapy to get to that point where I accepted that this was life now. Going from being like 18, 19 and having these big fantastic like dreams, like I was gonna be like, like maybe they're a little bit delusional because I was like 18, 19 and you think you can take on the world, but like I was like, I'm gonna be a star, I'm gonna be in movies, I'm gonna be in theater, like I'm gonna do all of these things. And then to have those like dreams completely ripped away from you, not because of lack of trying, but because I physically could not do those things anymore. And I find it funny that like now I'm like older and like I'm dealing with lupus and I've accepted what lupus is. I've got back into entertainment, but like with Twitch and YouTube, like in a different way. The story isn't over for you. If you are diagnosed with any chronic illness, the story is never over for you. I promise it's not. You just have to find your way to adapt. My adapting was starting YouTube, like creating videos talking about my experiences with lupus, doing makeup, doing something that felt like an art therapy for me to get by. I have ridiculous hand tremors. So there's like looking at accessible ways and finding a niche that if you feel that you can share that with people, share it with people, because there will be people out there. Still to this day, I've been doing this beauty content for like 5-6 years. Still to this day, someone will comment something really, really heartfelt about their experience with lupus, and I will sit and sob. I will sit and sob because I was that person once looking for someone for guidance or just to talk to, or someone that understood. And I think that's where like a lot of my confidence comes from, is finding an online community that understood me, talking to people in the comment sections of Lupus UK's posts, connecting on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and in messages because they've seen other people's like lupus posts has been really beneficial. Talking to a medical professional for counseling just about how I felt was so beneficial. And while again, this goes back to the campaign that I was part of with Lupus UK, that lupus is only part of my story. It really truly is, but I acknowledge that, again, it took me a long time to get there. Like, the person that's talking to you today is not the person that 6-7 years ago I would never have done this. There was sobbing, there was crying, there was complete mourning for the person that I was and all the things that I could do. And now going forward, I'm confident, I'm happy with who I am. I've accepted that this is the way life is. Sure, I still have setbacks and I'm like, wow, I wish like things had been different. Why me? But when you start to slip into that mind frame, it becomes a very dark and horrible place. Or I mean, I try not to go there. But it is finding things that you can adapt to. It's not an easy thing to do, and me just saying that sounds so simple. It is a process, and it is a long, painful process. But once you get yourself into a position where you're like, okay, I've got people around me that love me, I have all these wonderful, beautiful things around me that I need that will help me get through the day, I definitely think that helps with the acceptance.
Yeah, I think that you know, as I said, when I literally heard the words it came out of the appointment, I was laughing, so I'm laughing now. I think that's a nervous coping strategy. I started laughing, and I laughed and then cried and then laughed and then cried on that day. And I was like, trust me, you know, that I had the whole trust me to go and get something like this. Like, you know, what on earth? You know, and I would say that I have, you know, like the stages of grief. I've been through all of them, the bargaining, denial, you know, bargaining again. And I would say that for me, having lupus is continually grieving, and not necessarily in a way where you get to a dark place every now and again, but it's just remembering that there was a you that used to be that, you know, for me, I've been told I'm photosensitive. I said I've been told I am photosensitive. See, that's me trying to not accept it. So yeah, I'm photosensitive, so which means that, you know, when I go out, I have to cover myself completely. I have to wear, you know, protect my eyes, protect my head, so I'm always wearing hats. I can't go onto the beach and wear a bikini, and I was a bikini girl. I was one of those people that was like, yeah, hot girl summer, you know, there on the beach, sunbathing. You know, I would go to different holiday destinations. Yeah, Jamaica. Yeah, let's go Vegas. Let's go here. Let's go there. So that was me. So the fact that I can't do that anymore, you know, like Beth says, you adapt. You know, I go to different places now. I go to places where I can manage the temperature, where the sun isn't so, you know, so strong, where it's not going to, where I'm not going to risk my health. You know, I have young children. So for me, what kind of keeps bringing it back and bringing it home to me is the fact that if I risk my health, I can't look after them. And so it doesn't even become about me anymore. It becomes about, okay, well, yes, you might want to go and do this, but is it worth your health? And is it worth putting them in that situation? So yeah, so I am constantly grieving. You know, I have a lot of hair loss. I usually wear like wigs and extensions. Today I've just couldn't be bothered, so head wrap it is. But yeah, you know, I've got big patches on my scalp where it's the lupus has literally scarred it. So it's not just that there isn't any hair there, it's that my scalp is scarred like a burn. So there's no hair won't grow back there. And so yeah, when I'm doing my hair, sometimes I'm like, I have those feelings. I have that grief again, you know. So it's like a constant thing, a constant reminder. But you kind of, you know, the way that I deal with that is I allow it. I allow myself to grieve. I allow myself to feel upset. You know, I cry when I need to cry, because it's, you know, it can be real sometimes. you know, and we're not superhuman. You know, we have feelings. We are, you know, we say we're warriors, and we are. We're warriors because we get up every day and we keep going and we keep breathing and we keep smiling and we keep talking. But we are human as well, you know. Beth has her YouTube and her Twitch and everything like that. I write, and I'm grateful for the fact that I can hold a pen or actually type some days, because there have been days, and there are still days where I can't. You know, sometimes it takes me a little bit longer to do things. You know, when I went back to work, I would be like, yes, I'm back to work, typing. Oh, crazy! My hands have just gone, you know, and now they look like monsters. But the fact that the fact that I know that there will be a day when I can, kind of makes me feel better. It's like every day I wake up, there's hope. So, you know, if I feel sad one day, I allow myself to feel sad. There was a lot of times where I was trying not to do that, and holding that in me was just also destroying me. So it was like, okay, well, you either hold it in or you let it out. But my suggestion is just let it out, just cry, just cry, just pick up the phone someone and say, I'm having a really bad day. And if you can't phone someone, or if you're too embarrassed to phone someone, which there's been a lot of times where that has happened to me, I'm just like, I can't be crying again. I can't phone someone and cry again. I just put on a movie, I put on my comfort shows, and I let them do the crying for me. You know, Grey's Anatomy, you're always crying when you're watching Grey's Anatomy. And so, you know, I just let the tears stream down. Like, yes. You know, comfort shows, do things that make you feel good when you need it, and just allow yourself to feel the emotions, because holding it in, that will destroy you as much as anything else. And as we know, lupus flares can be triggered by stress. Lupus flares are triggered by trauma. So don't hold it in, let it all out.
Yeah, thanks all. It sounds like there's kind of that thing at diagnosis where you have some relief, we're getting some answers, there's some confusion, like what does this mean for me? What's happening? But then it's this continual process of acceptance seem to come out really strongly from all of you, and building those networks of support, finding what helps you to manage, like mentally, really importantly, as well as physically, seems to be a really big, again, that commonality between everyone. Yeah, I'll just take a question from someone who's in the chat at the moment. There's someone who's newly diagnosed, but they don't experience as severe symptoms as some of the ones that have been described today. So they're a bit worried, like, oh, does that mean that it's going to be that way for me, and that's my future from this, I guess, in that early kind of diagnosis stage. I would say that, you know, lupus can impact everyone so differently. People can have different symptoms, or they can have the same symptoms to different severities. It can be quite different. I know all of you have done a lot of work volunteering in the community, and I'm sure you've met people with varying degrees of symptoms and severity.
Yeah, definitely. I know some people who have been diagnosed and they barely have any symptoms, and they've remained stable, and their lupus is maintained. Their lupus is managed, and just because we have our symptoms, like I've never had any kidney involvement, but Khiry has, and there's certain things that will happen for one patient that won't happen for others. It's the problem with lupus is that it's so vast and there's so many different symptoms that that's why it's hard to diagnose. It's called the Great Pretender, isn't it? It's the Great Pretender. It mimics other things, and so if you've recently been diagnosed, please do not take what we're saying as our symptoms as being what will happen to you. That's not the case at all. You just have to know your body, look out for new symptoms if you feel them, write them down and report them to your rheumatologist and your GP. But yeah, no, just because things are happening to us lupus is so strange. There's no one size fits all. It's, yeah, different people have different symptoms.
I definitely think that lupus is like the jack of all trades in that sense, that like no one person experiences the same thing. I have been in and out of remission twice, which is really motivating when you go into remission, because you found like a treatment plan that works for you with your rheumatologist, at least in my case. And then to come back out of remission is so defeatist, because I felt like a fraud for like the 6 months that I had no symptoms whatsoever. Like nothing was happening to me. It was literally like lupus just disappeared, and for no reason. And it was when I was taking methotrexate at the time. It was when we tapered me off the methotrexate, which was ultimately the goal at the time, was to just have me on hydroxychloroquine and like the occasional steroid if I needed it. When we started to taper myself off methotrexate, I was fine for about 6 months. And then all of a sudden it hit me like a bus, like truly, truly hit me. Like it was like I had never been in remission. Like I couldn't move, I couldn't walk. The brain fog was so unreal. Like it was the classic, like you walk into a room and I'm a gamer, so I'm going to explain this in gamer terms. Like you walk into a room, you're playing Sims, and like the person has just cancelled your action and the sim is stood there going, why am I here? That was what like coming out of remission was like to me. And then all of a sudden, like I'm back at the rheumatologist and I'm being told that like my inflammation levels are dangerous, and then I'm hospitalized. So I went from like completely normal, like, so like whatever normal is, like completely experiencing no like symptoms whatsoever, to then bam, hit like a bus. Like all of these things are happening to me like tenfold and worse than they were happening before. It is so like the experience is so non-linear that I've met someone who says every 10 years I have a flare up. Every 10 years she has a flare up, and I was like, how? Like what causes lupus to do that? No one knows, because we're all so different. So please don't let anything that any of us have said have scared you, because there is still hope. With the right management course of medication, with the medical professionals that you speak to, you can live such a normal, happy, healthy life. It is just about finding that balance, and for some people it's harder than others. Don't let us scare you. Like there's still hope, promise.
Yeah, like both Miriam and Beth have said, obviously for me, I end up having kidney problems because of my lupus, but I spoke to a lot of people more recently that just have lupus, and their lupus is quite, like, it's been managed quite well, and they're like newly diagnosed. So yeah, like I said, don't let what we've said scare you. Lupus affects everyone differently. Some people may just have lupus on its own. Other people may have lupus with other conditions, like myself. So don't be scared of what we've said. Like I said, manage your symptoms. Obviously, if you feel anything different, you know your body better than anyone else. Obviously, if you start to feel any different, then talk to your rheumatologist and your GP.
Yeah, that's all great advice. And it relates to another question we got in the chat about someone who has multiple different conditions, recently diagnosed with lupus, and then how do you untangle what's causing what and all that kind of thing. Like that's real difficult.
Yeah,
And yeah, I think like Khiry said, it's kind of, and everyone said really, note things down, going back to your rheumatologist or your GP, talking about what's happening, because that kind of chronic illness detective work is really tough to do. So don't do it by yourself, like chat to your doctor about it and get them to do some of that work, untangling.
I mean, I have the same, like I have several autoimmune diseases now. I've just been diagnosed with celiac disease, which originally I thought was like just a food allergy. It's an autoimmune disease that's become very, very recent. I've also been diagnosed with PCOS, which isn't autoimmune, but some people argue that like with the genetic makeup and like how things have like, just like people have theories all the time for these things. And also been investigated for rosacea or DLE. They weren't quite sure at the time because of the way that my butterfly rash presents itself and like inflammation in my eye that I experience. Like since being diagnosed with lupus, I have all these other symptoms, ailments and things that have come out. And it is hard to find what has caused that specific symptom. When I get like a rash, I'm like, is this from lupus, or how is it allergies? Like what is going on? You never quite know, but it's like being a bit like Poirot for medical diagnosis, or Dr. House is probably a good good way of describing it. Having to write everything down and be like, well, that was consistent with me eating XYZ. It all comes back to that taking notes and being in sync with your body, which again is hard to do when you're chronically ill. But yeah, I completely feel that question. Like it's hard to tell what is what. But a lot of it, at least in my case, is down to stress. Knowing your triggers for certain things is really helpful to try and avoid them. But like, believe me, I can tell you with all the will in the world, you cannot just avoid stress. like it's just life.
Yeah, I think that yeah, similar to Beth, I have a lot of linked illnesses to the lupus. And how do I tell which is which or what's split up when? Quite honestly, it's been 6 years and I couldn't say that I can necessarily. You know, I know with the Sjogren's, when my gums start to hurt, like at the moment, I'm having issues with my gums and they're very sore. And so I'm like, okay, so that's, it's the S playing up now. And then, like Beth said, randomly I'll get rashes, and I'll be like, oh, am I going to have another DLE flare? Am I, and then the rash will go away, and I'm like, oh, it might have just been, it could have just been heat rash or something like that. So it can be very difficult to tell what is due to the lupus and what is due to the other things. But I know we keep saying writing everything down, but actually, and I am somebody who types a lot, but actually using your voice note on your phone or anything, I would highly recommend that, because when I was in the depths of my flare, I couldn't write a single thing. I could barely read or understand what people were saying. So I've got a lot of random videos and random voice notes that I've sent to myself, because that was the only way that I could note anything down. So I just wanted to add that. Don't think we expect you to be like writing down and typing
Right.
down, sitting at your laptop. That's just that. I mean, you might be able to do that. For me, that just was definitely not going to happen. So I would just send myself a little voice note. But yeah, it is difficult to tell which symptoms are which. I am a Googler, unfortunately, and I do tend to be, and that's how I was able to go back to my dentist and say, look, these are all the symptoms, and how we were able to come up with the Sjogren's, etc. But yeah, I think that it's, again, just knowing your body, tuning into your body. I know from me that specifically when I start to feel really, when I start to have high episodes of it, and when the brain fog really kind of, muddies everything I'm doing, I know that I have a lupus flare, like a proper flare. I will have intrusive thoughts at times, and I know before that, in my prior life, pre-diagnosis, I wasn't really happening, and my anxiety and stuff like that started to come about as my lupus was developing. And so when I start to feel like that again, when I start to feel like, paranoid about things and stuff, I know that that's my body telling me, you're going to flare up. You need to slow down. You need to rest. So again, it's about everybody knowing, if you can, remembering who you were before, and being able to understand where you're different, because when you understand what differences are, then you can say, okay, yeah, this must be to do with the lupus, because this isn't me.
Yeah, so it's kind of trying to figure out kind of that thing where it can impact people so differently, and what's for you a part of your lupus. And like when you have a new symptom, it could be part of your lupus, it could be something else. Like people have talked about having other conditions alongside. So that's why it's always really worth going and getting it checked out. Like, is this part of my lupus? Is there something else I'm not sure? And it's totally fine and good to do that. Like your doctors should welcome you coming to talk about that kind of thing. If you are part of a rheumatology department, some have patient helplines, which can be really helpful if your rheumatology department has one, because that can be a quicker way of getting through to like a specialist nurse more quickly than your next appointment would be, because sometimes there are a bit gaps in between and they can do a quick assessment, see if you need a sooner appointment. So if you do have a patient helpline, that could be a really great way to kind of check out some of those things, like, oh, I'm not sure if this is lupus as well, or some one of my other things, and that kind of thing. So they can be a really great resource. I'm just aware we've got about 10 minutes or so left. So I was just wondering if you could all give maybe some final thoughts or tips or anything you'd like to share around diagnosis and your experiences. That would be great.
I would say once you're diagnosed, it's not the end of the world. You can still go on to do the things that you want to do. Don't let lupus take away your whole life. What I say is, you control the illness. Don't let the illness control you. That's my quote that I go by. If you're passionate about something, still try and do it. Don't think that because you have lupus, that means it's the end of the world. It's the end of your life. You can still have lupus and still manage to live, a somewhat normal life, as long as you take care of yourself and do the right things.
Do you want to go, Maryann, or me? I would say
I'm trying to think of the answer.
All right, gotcha. It is only part of your story. Lupus is just one of those things that it's going to take you time to adapt to, and that's okay. Acknowledging that you can still get to your dreams, your goals, your aspirations, but it is going to be a slower journey, but that's okay. It took me a long while to accept that the goal and the journey you have in your head is always going to come with its peaks and valleys. It's always going to have its ups and downs. It's never going to be linear. And unfortunately, my not linear was becoming chronically ill. And, for some people, that is just the case. But finding adaptations, finding your people that will cheer you on, because you're going to meet people in life that when you're chronically ill, do not know how to cope with you, do not know how to deal with you, and they're not going to stick around, and that sucks. And that was a big realization that I had, that while those people I do believe really wanted the best for me, it was hard for them to see me the way that I was and what I couldn't achieve. And they didn't want to walk beside me, and that's okay. Let them go, because you will find your people along the way, whether that be online friends, whether that be through the Lupus UK forums, through Health Unlocked, through the comment section of Lupus UK's Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. You will find your people that are not always going to tell you what you want to hear, but they're going to share that emotion and that reality of what it's like to live with lupus or chronic illness. But it is really only part of your story.
Yeah, I mean, I echo that. I would say that, life can really have its twists and turns, and at the end of the day, you've been diagnosed, you're chronically ill, and each day you've got to just kind of get up and think to yourself, how can I make this day special? How can I make the most out of this day? And what can I do to, I don't know, for me, I think that, like I said, if I need a bed day, if I'm able to, because obviously I have kids and stuff, but if I need a bed day, I take that. I take each day literally as it comes. I do make plans. I used to be a diary warrior. Like everything used to be like, okay, months ahead, everything, pencil everybody in. And now I'm just like, I don't know. I might see you next week. I might not. You know, I think lupus, for me, lupus has taught me a lot about myself. It has taught me who I am, who I don't want to be, how I can change, you know. Like I said, just being so rigid, I'm not as rigid anymore. I can go with the flow a lot more because I have to. And I think that's really important, because there will be days where you feel great and there's days where you're not going to feel so great. And you have to, you know, like everybody said, you just have to accept that. And also, you know, reiterating what everybody else has said again, finding the new you and finding your purpose in that. You know, if you had told me in 2017 that I'd be writing for Lupus UK, I would have been like, huh? What are you talking about? You know, but I've always wanted to be a writer. I've always wanted to write. I wrote and self-published a poetry book, and that was in 2022. Never ever thought that I was going to do that, even though I had it in the back of my brain. I was like, oh yeah, I'll get to it eventually. And actually, lupus is what made me do it, because I was writing poetry to express, you know, to get out how I was feeling about my diagnosis and how I was feeling about my symptoms. And so that was, you know, that's what led me to collect. I collected the poetry that I'd written and published it, because I was like, actually, this might help people. And so I was able to fulfill my dream of being better because I had lupus. So there's different things, you know, like Khiry said, I've been volunteering with Lupus UK. I've gone and spoken with pharmaceutical companies. I've, you know, been asked to do so many things that probably I would not have done had I not been diagnosed. And not to say that, yeah, lupus is great. It's really not. But actually, my life has just progressed in a different way to what I actually expected it to. And I'm all right with that now. You know, I'm okay with it. It's still moving. It's still positive. And like I said before, there's still hope. There always is.
Yeah, that's really lovely sentiment to end on. I think the kind of think about all the complications of diagnosis and the challenges and the learning to accept and adapt and change, but then that feeling of actually it's just life going a slightly different way, and you can still do things you want to do in a different adapted way. And yeah, there's always hope, and it's taking each day as it comes and living with lupus rather than trying to battle against it. But yeah, Nikita's just shared some links in the chat, which has some links to further information about lupus, if you would like, and some resources. And also it's got our contact details at Lupus UK. So if we didn't get your question, or you have any other questions, you just want to chat to us or want to be put in touch with your local regional group, do get in touch with us. We're always happy to help if we can and provide what information we can. And yeah, thank you so much everyone for coming. And thank you so much to Beth, Maryann and Khiry for your openness and generosity and sharing your experiences. It's so appreciated. And I know even just from the video, people have said how much they've appreciated and helped. So yeah, thank you so much for your time today as well. But yeah, I hope, yeah, thank you. And yeah, hope everyone has a lovely rest of evening, and hopefully see you all again soon.
Take care, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Guys.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.